Have you ever noticed that the world does not always attack the weak with fists? It attacks them with disrespect. It interrupts them, ignores them, talks over them, laughs at their boundaries, and slowly convinces them that their voice doesn't matter. The painful truth is this: the moment people believe there are no consequences for disrespecting you, they will continue doing it until your confidence disappears completely. The first principle you must understand is that people do not fear loud emotions. They fear controlled emotions. There is a dangerous misconception that respect comes from raising your voice, proving your point, or reacting aggressively whenever someone challenges you. In reality, emotional reactions often expose weakness rather than strength. The more someone can predict your emotions, the easier it becomes to manipulate you. The person who immediately becomes angry, defensive, or desperate has already surrendered control. They are no longer directing the situation. They are being directed by it. Every interaction between people is a psychological exchange. Consciously or unconsciously, everyone is searching for patterns. They ask themselves, if I say this, how will this person react? If I ignore them, what will they do? If I insult them, can I get away with it? Once someone discovers that they can predict your response with complete accuracy, they gain confidence over you. They know exactly which buttons to press. They know exactly how to provoke you. Your emotions become their tools. This is why emotionally disciplined individuals seem almost untouchable. They refuse to hand over the steering wheel of their mind to someone else's behavior. Instead of reacting instantly, they create space between the event and the response. That small pause changes everything. It sends an invisible message. You do not control me. Think about the people who command the most respect in any environment. It is rarely the loudest person in the room. It is the individual who remains composed while everyone else loses control. When tension rises, they become calmer. When others rush to defend themselves, they become quieter. Their emotional stability creates uncertainty in the minds of those around them. Uncertainty is psychologically powerful because people naturally fear what they cannot predict. If someone insults you expecting an angry outburst and instead receives calm silence, their confidence begins to weaken. They start questioning themselves. They wonder whether they have underestimated you. They wonder if consequences are coming later rather than immediately. That uncertainty forces caution. Many people misunderstand silence. They assume silence means weakness, but there are two very different kinds of silence. One comes from fear, where someone remains quiet because they feel powerless. The other comes from strength, where someone remains quiet because they have complete control over themselves. The first silence invites more attacks. The second silence makes people uncomfortable because they cannot read what is happening beneath the surface. Human beings are deeply uncomfortable with unanswered questions. When every emotion is displayed openly, there is no mystery. But when your thoughts remain guarded, people begin filling the gaps with their own imagination. Often what they imagine is far more intimidating than anything you could have said. This does not mean becoming cold, arrogant, or emotionally detached from everyone. It means becoming selective about when your emotions are revealed. Every emotional reaction is information. The more information you freely give away, the easier you become to understand. The easier you become to understand, the easier you become to manipulate. Consider how often people lose respect simply because they cannot tolerate discomfort. Someone criticizes them, and they immediately begin explaining themselves. Someone ignores them, and they desperately seek reassurance. Someone rejects them, and they chase validation. Every desperate reaction communicates dependence. It tells others that your emotional state depends on their approval. Power begins where dependence ends. When your confidence no longer relies on someone else's opinion, their ability to control you begins to disappear. They can criticize you, but they cannot shake you. They can doubt you, but they cannot define you. They can attempt to provoke you, but they cannot force you into becoming the version of yourself that benefits them. There is another reason emotional unpredictability commands respect. Most people operate on impulse. They speak before thinking. They react before understanding. They allow temporary emotions to create permanent consequences. The disciplined person does the opposite. They observe first. They analyze motives. They recognize that every action reveals something about the other person. Instead of becoming consumed by emotion, they become students of human behavior. When someone attempts to disrespect you, ask yourself a different question. Instead of asking, "How do I defend myself?" ask, What does this reveal about them? This shift transforms you from a participant into an observer. Observers maintain power because they are gathering information while everyone else is revealing it. People often expose their insecurities through disrespect. Some insult because they crave attention. Others interrupt because they fear being ignored. Some belittle because they secretly feel inadequate. Once you recognize these patterns, their behavior loses its emotional impact. You stop taking every slight personally because you understand that most disrespect says more about the offender than the target. The strongest people are not those who never feel anger. They are those who decide when anger deserves expression. They understand that emotional energy is valuable. They refuse to waste it on every insult, every opinion, or every attempt to provoke them. They choose their battles carefully because they know that constant reaction weakens authority. When people realize they cannot predict your emotional responses, they begin approaching you differently. They speak more carefully. They test fewer boundaries. They become aware that every action carries uncertainty, and uncertainty creates hesitation. That hesitation is often the beginning of genuine respect, because those who master themselves are far more difficult to master by anyone else. One of the greatest misconceptions about respect is believing that words alone create it. They do not. You can tell people to respect you 100 times, but if nothing happens when they ignore your request, your words become meaningless. Human behavior follows a simple psychological principle. People repeat what they are allowed to repeat. Every time someone crosses your boundaries without consequence, they become more confident that they can do it again. Eventually, disrespect becomes normal because you have unknowingly trained them to believe it is acceptable. Most people think boundaries are statements. They say things like, "Please don't speak to me like that," or "I don't appreciate being treated this way." While these words may sound strong, they have no real power unless they are supported by action. A boundary without consequences is merely a suggestion. Suggestions can be ignored, consequences cannot. This is why genuinely respected individuals rarely spend their time announcing their boundaries. Instead, they quietly enforce them. They understand that people believe actions far more than promises. If someone repeatedly lies to them, trust is reduced. If someone consistently disrespects them, access becomes limited. If someone refuses to value their time, they stop offering it. They never waste energy trying to convince others to change. They simply change their level of availability. That is the difference between emotional dependence and self-respect. Many people remain trapped in unhealthy relationships, toxic friendships, and disrespectful work environments because they fear consequences more than they value themselves. They worry that enforcing boundaries will make others angry. They fear rejection. They fear loneliness. They fear conflict. As a result, they tolerate behavior that slowly destroys their confidence. But here is the uncomfortable truth. Every time you tolerate repeated disrespect, you teach yourself that your own standards do not matter. The damage is not only external, it becomes internal. Your subconscious begins believing that you deserve less than you truly do. Over time, your posture changes. Your voice changes. Your confidence fades because your actions no longer match your self-worth. People are remarkably observant, even when they are not consciously paying attention. They notice who keeps forgiving endless excuses. They notice who always says yes. They notice who constantly sacrifices their own needs to keep everyone else comfortable. These patterns send silent messages about how you expect to be treated. Respect begins the moment those patterns change. Imagine two individuals. Both are intelligent, both are kind, both work equally hard, yet one is constantly interrupted, ignored, and taken for granted, while the other receives consideration without demanding it. The difference often lies in one simple factor. One person has made disrespect expensive, while the other has made it free. People naturally calculate costs and rewards in every relationship. They may not realize they are doing it, but their minds are always asking, what happens if I cross this person's line? If the answer is nothing, there's little reason for them to stop. But if the answer is losing trust, opportunities, cooperation, or access to someone valuable, their behavior changes almost immediately. Notice that true consequences are not acts of revenge. Revenge is emotional. Consequences are intentional. Revenge seeks to hurt. Consequences seek to protect. There is a profound difference between attacking someone because they offended you and calmly removing yourself from situations where disrespect is tolerated. Emotionally mature people understand this distinction. They do not scream to prove a point. They do not create unnecessary drama. They simply refuse to participate in environments that repeatedly violate their standards. This quiet withdrawal often has a stronger psychological impact than any heated argument because it forces people to experience the absence of someone they underestimated. Another mistake many people make is giving endless second, third, fourth, and fifth chances without requiring any change in behavior. Forgiveness is admirable, but repeated forgiveness without accountability communicates weakness rather than compassion. It tells others that your limits are flexible, negotiable, and ultimately meaningless. Strong boundaries also require consistency. An inconsistent boundary is almost as ineffective as having none at all. If you object to disrespect one day but tolerate it the next, people become confused about where your standards truly lie. They begin testing you more often because they know your response depends on your mood rather than your principles. Consistency builds credibility. This applies not only to relationships but to every area of life. If you constantly allow interruptions, people will interrupt you. If you always make yourself available at the expense of your own priorities, people will expect unlimited access to your time. If you continuously rescue people from the consequences of their own choices, they will eventually see your generosity as an obligation rather than a gift. One of the most powerful forms of boundary setting is learning to say no without guilt or excessive explanation. Many people weaken their own authority by over-explaining every decision. They feel compelled to justify why they cannot help, why they disagree, or why they are unavailable. In doing so, they unintentionally invite negotiation. Every unnecessary explanation gives others something to argue against. Confident people understand that not every decision requires a defense. A calm, respectful refusal often carries more authority than a lengthy justification. They know that protecting their time, energy, and peace is not selfish, it is necessary. They recognize that every yes given out of fear becomes a quiet betrayal of themselves. When people realize that your boundaries are steady, your standards are clear, and your actions consistently reinforce your words, something remarkable begins to happen. They stop testing your limits because they already know where those limits are. They become more thoughtful in how they speak to you, more careful with your trust, and more aware that your presence is a privilege rather than a guarantee. In that moment, respect is no longer something you ask for. It becomes the natural response to the value you place on yourself and the unwavering standards you refuse to compromise. There is a truth about human nature that many people resist accepting. Respect is closely connected to value. The world does not simply reward good intentions, kindness, or effort. It rewards what is rare, useful, disciplined, and difficult to replace. This is why some people are constantly ignored, while others naturally command attention without demanding it. The difference often lies in one question: what happens when you are no longer there? If your absence changes nothing, people take your presence for granted. But if your absence creates a noticeable loss, people begin to value you differently. They become more careful with their words, more respectful with your time, and more aware that access to you is not guaranteed. Most people spend their lives chasing respect directly. They seek approval, ask for recognition, and try to convince others of their worth. But this approach rarely works because genuine respect cannot be forced. It emerges naturally when people recognize that you possess something valuable, whether that value is knowledge, competence, discipline, character, influence, creativity, reliability, or inner strength. Think about the individuals who leave a lasting impression wherever they go. They are not always the loudest, the the richest, or the most dominant. Often, they are the people who have spent years quietly building themselves. They have developed skills. They have mastered emotions. They have created opportunities. They have cultivated a reputation that speaks before they enter the room. Value creates gravity. Just as powerful objects attract everything around them, valuable individuals attract attention, respect, and opportunities. This is not because they seek validation, but because they have become difficult to ignore. Their actions have created a presence that others feel. Many people make the mistake of believing that respect comes from being constantly available. They think saying yes to everyone will make them appreciated. They believe sacrificing their time endlessly will increase their importance. But human psychology often works in the opposite direction. What is always available is often undervalued. What requires effort, discipline, and standards becomes more desirable. This principle applies everywhere. In friendships, relationships, workplaces, and social circles, people unconsciously evaluate value. They notice who solves problems, who remains reliable under pressure, who possesses rare skills, and who continues growing, while others remain stagnant. Over time, these qualities create influence. The strongest position in life is not one where you force people to respect you. It is one where people realize that losing your presence would cost them something important. But to reach that position, you must invest in yourself relentlessly. Most people focus outward. They study others, compare themselves to others, and seek acceptance from others. Few people focus inward with equal intensity. Few ask difficult questions. What am I building? What skills am I developing? What strengths make me valuable? What discipline separates me from the average person? Every hour spent improving yourself increases your leverage in life. Knowledge is leverage. Competence is leverage. Emotional stability is leverage. Financial independence is leverage. Discipline is leverage. The more leverage you possess, the less dependent you become on the approval of others, and the less dependent you become, the stronger your presence becomes. Dependence weakens authority because it gives others control over your emotions and decisions. If your happiness depends entirely on being liked, you will tolerate disrespect. If your confidence depends entirely on praise, criticism will destroy you. If your identity depends entirely on external validation, rejection will leave you lost. But when your sense of worth is built through years of effort, learning, and self-mastery, something changes. You stop chasing attention because you no longer need it. Ironically, this is often the moment attention begins to find you. People are drawn toward those who have purpose. A person with purpose moves differently. They protect their time. They choose their commitments carefully. They understand that life is finite, and they refuse to waste their energy trying to impress everyone. This creates an invisible aura of value because people sense that your attention must be earned rather than automatically given. Another important lesson is that value is not only external. It is not only about money, status, or achievements. Inner value matters just as much. Can people rely on your word? Do you remain calm during chaos? Do you solve problems instead of creating them? Do you maintain standards even when no one is watching? Character creates long-term respect because people remember how you make them feel. They remember who remained steady during difficult times. They remember who stood firm under pressure. They remember who acted with strength rather than weakness. The world is filled with people seeking immediate recognition, but lasting respect belongs to those willing to invest patiently in themselves. Every skill learned, every challenge overcome, every moment of discipline adds another layer to your value. Over time, this process changes the balance of every relationship. Instead of asking, how can I make people respect me, you begin asking, how can I become so valuable that respect becomes inevitable? And this is where true power begins. When people understand that your time is valuable, they protect it. When they recognize your competence, they seek your opinion. When they see your discipline, they become more careful in how they approach you. When they realize your presence improves situations, they begin to fear losing access to you. The greatest form of influence is not making people afraid of your anger. It is making them aware of your value. Because anger fades, threats lose power, and force creates resistance. But value creates attraction, and attraction creates respect. The more you build yourself, the more your absence carries weight. and the more people understand that taking you for granted would be a mistake. The greatest mistake people make when trying to command respect is believing they must become louder than everyone else. They think authority is measured by the volume of their voice, the force of their opinions, or the intensity of their reactions. They confuse intimidation with influence, but history repeatedly teaches a different lesson. The individuals who leave the deepest psychological impact are often those who speak the least and reveal the least. Their power does not come from constant display, it comes from disciplined restraint. There is a reason silence unsettles people. Human beings naturally seek information. We want to know what others think, how they feel, and what they are planning. When someone constantly explains themselves, argues over every criticism, or reacts to every challenge, they satisfy that curiosity immediately. There is no mystery left. Their entire emotional world becomes visible. But the person who remains composed and measured creates uncertainty, and uncertainty has always been one of the strongest forms of psychological influence. Imagine entering a room where everyone competes for attention. People interrupt one another. They speak over each other. Everyone is trying to prove how intelligent, important, or successful they are. Then there is one individual who listens more than they speak. They observe every interaction. They do not rush to impress anyone. When they finally speak, everyone pays attention because their words are rare rather than constant. Scarcity creates value. The same principle applies to speech. Words that are used carelessly lose their weight. Words that are chosen carefully gain authority. This is why powerful individuals often communicate with remarkable simplicity. They do not overwhelm people with endless explanations because they understand that confidence rarely needs excessive justification. Many people unknowingly weaken themselves by trying to win every argument. They believe every criticism deserves a response. Every insult deserves a comeback. Every misunderstanding demands clarification. But constantly defending yourself places your emotional state under the control of other people's opinions. It allows strangers, critics, and difficult personalities to determine where your attention goes. Silent power rejects this trap. It understands that attention is one of your most valuable resources. Every unnecessary argument steals time that could have been invested in growth. Every emotional battle drains energy that could have strengthened your future. Wise people choose carefully where their focus belongs because they recognize that attention is a form of currency. This does not mean remaining silent out of fear. It means remaining silent out of choice. There is a profound difference between someone who cannot speak and someone who chooses not to. The first silence reflects helplessness. The second reflects control. Control is what people respect. When someone attempts to provoke you and you refuse to become emotionally available for manipulation, you immediately change the dynamic. The other person expected your anger. They expected your frustration. They expected you to defend yourself. Instead, they encounter composure. Suddenly, they lose the script they had prepared. Calmness under pressure is one of the clearest signals of inner strength. Anyone can remain confident when life is comfortable. True character appears when circumstances become difficult. During conflict, many people reveal their fears without realizing it. They begin speaking faster, their emotions become louder, their decisions become impulsive. Every reaction exposes their internal state. The disciplined individual does the opposite. Pressure slows them down instead of speeding them up. They listen before responding. They observe before judging. They think before acting. This deliberate pace creates authority because it communicates that they are guided by principles rather than impulses. Another aspect of silent power is learning not to reveal every ambition, every strategy, or every future plan. Many people announce their goals long before achieving them because they crave immediate recognition. They seek praise before results. Unfortunately, this often weakens motivation and invites unnecessary criticism. Powerful people allow results to introduce them. Instead of talking constantly about becoming successful, they quietly build success. Instead of announcing discipline, they practice it daily. Instead of demanding admiration, they become admirable. Eventually, their actions speak louder than any speech they could have delivered. Silence also protects you from unnecessary enemies. The more opinions you constantly broadcast, the more opportunities you create for pointless conflict. This does not mean abandoning your beliefs. It means recognizing that not every battle deserves your participation. Some arguments exist only to drain your energy. Some people seek reactions rather than understanding. Responding to every challenge only elevates distractions that should never have received your attention in the first place. Another characteristic of silent power is emotional consistency. People feel secure around individuals whose behavior remains stable. They know what principles guide them. They know that temporary emotions will not suddenly change their character. This consistency builds trust, and trust becomes the foundation of lasting influence. Contrast this with someone whose emotions fluctuate constantly. One day they are confident. The next day they are discouraged. One compliment lifts them, while one criticism destroys them. Their emotional instability makes them difficult to rely upon because their behavior depends on external circumstances rather than internal discipline. Inner discipline creates outer authority. This authority does not require threats. It does not require domination. It does not require humiliating others to feel important. In fact, truly powerful people rarely need to prove they are powerful. Their confidence is no longer dependent on winning every conversation or controlling every room. They understand that real strength is quiet because it has nothing to advertise. People eventually recognize this difference. They notice who remains composed when everyone else panics. They notice who speaks with intention instead of emotion. They notice who acts decisively without seeking applause. Over time, these qualities form an invisible reputation. Others begin choosing their words more carefully around you, not because you are loud or intimidating, but because your calm presence signals unwavering self-control. They understand that your silence is not emptiness, it is discipline. Your restraint is not weakness, it is confidence. And your quiet confidence makes disrespect feel like a dangerous mistake because those who truly possess power never need to announce it.